This is Catherine, and this is Taking Tea with Catherine. I am drinking lemon ginger tea today, which is the tea I drink when I think I might be coming down with something, or I just feel like having lemon and ginger. But today, I'm having one of those. Is it allergies? Is it a cold? It could be both because sometimes the allergies leave me vulnerable to things, and as I have a new cat, it's likely that that is the possibility. Right now, I'm a little bit allergic to cats, and whenever I have a new one, my body has to adjust. You love hearing this, don't you? But I thought this would be a perfect opportunity, sounding a little bit nasal and pathetic, to do another Bookish Hypochondriac episode. I'm not going to talk specifically about any individual books. I might mention one or two, but I'm thinking today about those of us who look for opportunities to read, time-wise, and in the past year, I found pockets of opportunities that I didn't have earlier because of just different changes in my schedule. But generally, a lot of us who are readers, most, not all, but most of us have some kind of occupation, whether it's a job or a family obligation, something that takes up a lot of our time. And that's okay because we all should be busy. But we also want to read, and we don't always have as much time to read as we'd like. This time of year, it's February, by now in New York, we usually have had at least one good snowstorm. And my hope always, as a selfish person who doesn't have to shovel anything, is that it happens sometime during the work week so that I could get time off from work and not, and have an excuse. I could have, my refrigerator home could be stocked, and, as long as the power doesn't go out, I'm perfectly happy having to stay home because it's just too much outside and not having to go to work. But then, of course, I have to navigate going in the next day. My cat is putting his claws on me. That is not fun, Freddie. Freddie, I am not your cushion. Okay, anyway, you don't see him. He's putting his nose and his claws everywhere. He'll be determined to be a part of this, whether he is visible or not. But so like, it sounds, like I said, it sounds selfish because I don't have to shovel, but it's nice, the thought of, I don't have to go anywhere. I have an entire day in my case, it's with my cats and my books and my tea and whatever I have to read. Maybe even some television, but mainly I think about reading time, and it's just such a comfort. But I don't know about this year. I don't see any big snowstorms happening this year, and it better not happen right when I'm flying to London and delay my flight, because that would happen, right? It's always a thing. If anytime I book a trip, anytime between December or even November and April, it's always a gamble, But we're not talking about that today. However, there is the other thing that happens, and that is the sick day. The sick day is a day where you don't go to work because you are sick. In my case, I have a good amount of sick days given to me for my job, and if I run out of them, which I inevitably do, I can always break into some of my other days, and I hate that I have to do that, but you do. And thankfully my health is such that I tend to only need a day or so tops when I'm not feeling well. Sometimes I just need to rest up or something. I've had some bad days too. The worst was the kidney stone incident of 2018, which you definitely don't want to hear about, but that was a whole week that I had to take off because of that situation. So there are two different kinds of sick, and I am not talking about sick as in serious, having to be in the hospital or that kind of sick, or having to not be mobile at all, having to depend on someone else. I'm talking about the sick that keeps you out of work, but you'll be going back soon kind of sick. And so again, there are two types of sick days. The sick days where you can read, and the sick days where you just can't. And I think you know which ones I prefer to have. Not that I want to feel sick ever, but if I'm going to not be 100% healthy, let it be a day that I could still read. So, for instance, when that kidney stone situation happened, I was in the kind of pain that can only be treated by certain drugs that I don't encourage taking on a regular basis, and that put me in a basic, okay, when I wasn't feeling pain, I was feeling completely out of it, and reading was out of the question. I think I lay on a couch and listened to The Adventures of Sherlock Holmes, Jeremy Brett version on television because that's all I could do. But I prefer not to have to deal with that kind of pain. I think that's a pretty logical thing. And then there's the kind like migraines where, okay, it's only going to last a day or two, and I usually don't need to take off for them, but if I do, it's because it's just so bad that I can't look at the computer at all, which means reading is pretty much out of the question. However, there's days where I may have a bad migraine, but there's a few hours where whatever, Tylenol made it not so bad, and I could read a few pages of a book, as long as it's under low light. But it's still kind of not a guarantee. Then there are the days that are, okay, and we're not even talking about having the flu, which I haven't had in a while, and I hope not to have. The flu where you're just so out of it because you're just so tired, on top of being in pain. When you have things like strep throat, which is like the kidney stone of the throat, where you're just in so much pain, and it's a scary thing, strep, because it's an infection. It can lead to dangerous things, so it's not really the kind of thing you want. But there are such things as a really bad cold, where, and it could be a sinus infection too, but like it's a kind of thing where you could take stuff and you could treat it so that you don't feel terrible 24/7, but you also don't, maybe you're not quite well enough to go to work, and even if you possibly could have soldiered on through the workday, you didn't want to carry that to people at your job, whether you care about them or not, because you don't want to be that person. I was very careful the past few months because there was someone at work who was pregnant, and I really didn't want to be sick around that person, and I didn't get sick. I didn't catch anything during that time, which is great. But so a coworker did, and they said, yeah, if I was not feeling good, I just took off because I didn't want to be near her. So, and that's how you do it. You care about other people. Some people are more vulnerable, and you don't want to get them sick, so you stay home, even if you could have gone through the day. It's just the nice thing to do. I have been in situations where people came in and they sounded horrible and they looked terrible, and they were like, I'm here though, look at me, and then like a week later everybody else is out, and that was not productive. So if you have that kind of not feeling well, you could probably, as long as your sinuses aren't that bad and your throat isn't that bad, or even if you have like something like bronchitis where you're coughing a lot, you could probably be at the point where you're going to have some time where you can sit propped up so you're elevated, your head, but you can read a bit. At least I can. And then there's the other more TMI thing that I tend to deal with, which is I don't get a lot of stomach viruses or stomach flus or any of those things, thankfully, but I do have that digestive issue that I've talked about, in which there are days where I think that it might be a risk to get on the subway train, because if there's any delays in my situation, something terrible could happen, and I don't want to talk about that. So even if it may have not lasted me the entire day, I may have to call out, which means that I'm safe at home, but I feel, and as long as I don't feel nauseous, because nauseous is bad, never want to feel that, but as long as I'm feeling pretty okay, otherwise, I could just be in my close quarters and I could still read. So these are good, these, when I say good sick days, no one wants to feel sick, and I'm not even going to go into mental health days, because that's, everybody knows what they should and shouldn't do when it comes to that. But I'm talking about like feeling physically ill. Sometimes I've had times where my back hurt because I throw my back on, and I need to stay home, and usually then I can read too. So again, if I'm going to get sick, I'm always like, two things. Please let it be something that, at the very least, I may lose my appetite for a day or so and maybe lose a few pounds, but I don't like to think that way. And then the other one is, please let it be something where I can spend time. Okay, yeah, you should sleep, you should rest, obviously, and eat your pathetic soup or whatever, but you could also read. And then the other question is, what kind of books does one read when they're sick? Well, it depends on the kind of sick. Okay, Janie is biting the side of this lounge. Excuse me a moment. Crisis averted. These cats, it's like living in a zoo. But I love them. But anyway, so like, say if you're feeling any kind of digestion issue, or even the slightest bit of queasiness. Oh, I didn't even talk about times I've had to take off from being dizzy. I don't want to talk about that either. Reading is pretty much out of the question for that too, so it's not fun at all. But I wouldn't read anything that's food-based, like food memoirs, cooking things, anything that talks about food, because, yeah, you don't want to go there. or anything too unsettling, anything too violent. I mean, I don't tend to read things that are violent, but you know what I mean, like things that cover certain things that are little, maybe not for the faint of heart. So maybe that day, but then again, you may be different. This may be the thing that gets you through. You know, like some people love reading really tragic stories and crying themselves out. And that does bring me to my little anecdote. I thought I had this book, but I can't seem to find it. I'll probably find it later on when I'm not looking for it. But one time I had one of those sinusy days off where I was just sitting in bed and I wasn't feeling horrible, but I was definitely not well enough to go to work. And I had the book, The Book Thief by, and now I'm forgetting his last name, Markus something like Zusak or something. I'll have to link it later on. I actually met him one time when they had the premiere for the film, and I went to it. My friend had got some tickets to it, and he was there, and I asked a question. My question was, when you're writing books like this, do you realize when you're writing it that you're writing something that is a tearjerker at that moment, that particular scene? I don't know how I phrased it, but I think he just kind of like, laughed or whatever. I don't think he thought that. But when I was I remember reading this when I was sick, and I remember like, okay, so my nose was running, my insides were leaky, gross, and my eyes were tearing, not just from the cold, but from crying, because I'm not going to tell you anything about the story or what happens, but at one point I was just, I don't cry very often from reading books, but I did from that book. It just hit a nerve in me. So yeah, that I don't know why, but whenever I think of being sick at home and reading, even though it's been years since I read that book, I think of The Book Thief. So I think, like, for me, when I'm having a sick day, I'm thinking to myself, is it going to be a book thief day, or is it going to be a streaming Sherlock Holmes pathetically on the couch day? And I think you know which one I'd rather have. My voice is getting weird. Yeah, for me though, I mean, yeah, I tend to be entertained by even kind of difficult books, but I think anything that, especially if you have anything that's a headache, even a sinus headache, a little fever headache, or definitely not a migraine, don't read anything that's taxing to you, unless for some reason you like that kind of pain. Don't read anything that takes too much cerebral energy, because you want to feel better. So to me, obviously, if you really just want to read a big, Les Miserables classic, then go for it. Or if you want to read some, thick science book, that's your decision. But if you're anything like me, read something slightly lighter. I mean, a cozy mystery, just a little, like a chick lit or whatever they like to call that. I don't like that expression, but something along those lines, something that you could read without thinking too much. Not that you don't want to concentrate on a plot, but So that's my little suggestion. It's not like I'm gonna give you a list of books you should read in your sick time, because I really think that it depends on who you are. And some people really do want to read something ponderous, and good for you. When I ended up in the hospital one time overnight because they thought it was a heart attack, and it was not. It was definitely not. But I didn't have a book with me that I had brought with me. My friend brought me a big book about Thomas Jefferson, and I love those kind of books, but it was just not for me. And I'm not really thinking about hospital books either, so we're not really talking about that. But generally, when I'm having a sick day, if it's the kind of sick day that I can concentrate a little bit, I will go to the whatever is on my TBR that is a little bit, complicated. But I still think that if my preference is to read something that is just a breeze, because it's your day off. Whether you're feeling great, you're not dancing in a field, but whether you're feeling not so bad or you're feeling pretty darn bad, you want to just chill a little bit, I think, and not just with Netflix. So I hope you've enjoyed my little Bookish Hypochondriac time. Obviously, being a hypochondriac doesn't mean that you don't actually get sick. It just means that your mind goes all kinds of places when you're feeling slightly off. And one of my things is, what is my reading opportunity? I have a long weekend coming up, so I'm going to try to take at least one of those days to rest up this thing, whatever's happening. But until then, I'm going to get through the week. And everybody else before me had a cold, so if this was contagious, well, they gave it to me. So this is Catherine from Taking Tea with Catherine. I wonder how you're feeling today after this. If you're feeling good, then great. If you're feeling a little off now, I hope you have a wonderful tea-filled, emergency-filled, airborne, whatever day. Take care.